Welcome, everyone. And Madam Clerk?
First up, Your Worship, is roll call. I've taken the roll, and all members of council are present, with the exception of Councillor Tame and Councillor Barry.
Thank you. And next item, please.
Next item is reading of the call. I can confirm notice of this special meeting was sent out on May 23rd, 2024, in accordance with the requirements of the Municipal Act, and all members of City Council were given notice that a special meeting will be held this date to hear a presentation on the Maple Leaf Foods Sports Complex and budget. And in view of the above compliance and that there is quorum, it is lawful to proceed with this special meeting.
Thank you. And next item.
Under the order of general business, Your Worship, it is the Maple Leafs Foods Sports Complex budgets.
Thank you. That'll be Mr. Pulak.
Good evening, Council, Your Worship. We are on the verge of about to award another contract, and we thought this would be a good time to come to Council to provide you an update on where things stand with the project, since it's been, well, I can't remember the last time we were up here providing you an update, so that by itself would warrant providing one. So, just going to give you a quick background. I know you've heard about the project ad nauseum, but I think it's just worth a while to revisit some of the facts. We're going to talk about the work completed to date, because we have finished phase one, the work remaining, the financials, and then afterward we'll either have a discussion or some questions. So just to remind Council that we are provided funding through the ISIP program, which is providing funding for our FIFA-side soccer fields, up to 5 11 by 11 soccer fields, ultimate frisbee field, cricket pitch, clubhouse with change rooms and washrooms, and 3.6 kilometers of pathways, and not mentioned in here, I'll throw in the berms for good measure, because they will protect the fields from high water events. So we have completed phase one of the project, which we started, I think, about a year and a half ago, somewhere in that area, which was really site grading of the entire area, so really doing the rough grading where our fields were going to be, the underground infrastructure which would service the area, stormwater retention ponds, site access, internal roadways, and parking lot. This was all encompassed under the phase one, which was completed in last year. So now we move on to the other phases, and I just want to briefly remind Council, we decided to approach this in phases. So this is a multi-phase project. We have up to 3 phases with some kind of phase 2As thrown in, just because we didn't want to have to renumber everything. So we go into phase 2A in that. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. Phase 2, which includes the irrigation, site lighting, FIFA, artificial turf, cricket pitch, with batting cages and the West Sport Fields, was tendered and closed on May 16th. This is really what allows the complex to be utilized as we've envisioned right from the start. So once these get complete, at bare minimum, we can begin to utilize this complex. There are some other things that we need to finish, and I'll mention that in my presentation, but at least that complex will be functional. The other thing that we're looking at tendering very shortly is the storage facility, which includes the main yard and the irrigation equipment. So it has been tendered and it's pending award as well. So that is on top of phase 2. But we did that by a slightly different method, working through a contractor that we had hired to help manage the project. That said, the storage facility is one of those things that we consider absolutely necessary to complete or to make the fields functional. Work remaining, so there's phase 2A, which is the naturalized landscaping. Design for the naturalized landscaping it's ready to be tendered. We're holding off on doing it right now, but this has to do with the fields that we're not going to be working on in phase 2. We have to naturalize them and have grass on them. And same thing with the retention pond, we're naturalizing that as well. But this is going to be on hold and be tendered in later this year, early 2025. The clubhouse, which is tied to ISIP funding as well. The design is 66% complete and on hold till further notice until, and I'm going to be talking why we've put that on hold for now. and then work related to the Assiniboine River for long-term irrigation source. So one of the things that we envisioned that these fields would be irrigated from water from the river. Problem when you pull from the river and you have to create a structure in the river, you got to work with Department of Fisheries, which is difficult at best, and we're having some challenges there. In the meantime, we are going to irrigate our fields with city water. We're going to do it at nighttime, so we're not impacting the capacity of the residents to either use water or industries or to water your grass or whatever means you would do during the day. Just to talk about financials, just briefly to remind you how we're financing this project. 16.6 million is what we've budgeted for this project. 6.64 is from the province, 3.96 from Canada, and 6 million is coming from the city in the form of a debenture. 6.1 million is spent to date on essentially phase one construction, leaving us $10.5 million for the rest of the project. So I just want to talk about the phase two part of the project. So phase two is the finishing of the fields that we want to have ready to make the field operational. That's the one that we have tendered and closed, and it came in a cost of $5.7 million. The storage building and site works, this is the one that has to do with maintenance, and that is $975,000. Irrigation went well and intake line. So this is the precursor to actually pulling water from the river. That's $372,000. And then the consulting fees to support the construction efforts. With a 10% contingency thrown in there, the total budget for those items is $7.98 million, leaving us a budget remaining of $2.5 million. So, if we were to complete everything that we've envisioned, that including our wish list, so we're going to talk about naturalization, we're going to talk about the clubhouse at $3 million, in water work, which is the intake at the river, phase through, which is some optional items, and the remaining consulting fees. That total estimate comes to $5.89 million, which is $3.3 million over the amount remaining in our budget. I just want to talk about, and I'm not saying that that's what the cost is or how we're going to fund it. What I'm saying is that if we were to do all the items that we envisioned we were going to do, that would be the cost. That said, we've been in discussions with finance and with the user groups, and there are items in there that we can delay or put off. For instance, phase three, which is the optional items, we can take that off the table and delay that till further. The clubhouse and site works. The clubhouse, again, as I've stated already, has funding attached to it, so we're required to build it. The question is we can build it, we're required to have two FIFA-sized dressing rooms in it. As per our agreement with ACC, we'll have to have some washroom facilities in it, so we can reduce the cost of the clubhouse initially, with the intent of always finishing it. But that's something we're investigating. We're talking about a long-term irrigation source. So I guess what I'm saying in all of this is, take this lightly. It's something we're still working on in behind the scenes as to how we can reduce that number, and how, if we do go over the amount remaining in the budget, how we can finance it. So certainly that's something I'll be bringing back to council for discussion. I just don't want you walking away thinking we're $3.3 million short on this project, because there are items where we can continue to phase it and have and still get the facility that we wanted. I think the important thing to remember out of all of this is that come the end of phase two, we will have a functional facility. So with that, I wanted to keep it brief in view of the discussion you're having right after this one. And I wanted to keep it fairly high level. But those are kind of where things stand right now in that project. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and I do have Stephanie here to answer any of the questions I'm sure I won't be able to answer. So,
Thank you, Mr. Pulak. Good to get an update. Councillor Desjardins with a question.
Thank you through your worship. I have questions that you might not be able to answer today, Patrick. Some we should. Are we over budget? Like, I can't remember where we were the last time, phase one, phase two, phase three, what we were expecting those costs to be in phase one and what we were expecting them to be in phase two. Are we a percentage over now than what we were? And if that's, and then my follow-up is, if that's the case, what is causing those overruns? And if there aren't, then we're happy.
and I will certainly add to yours, Councillor Desjardins, is that COVID has certainly affected our prices. We've seen prices increase right across. I'm not saying that's the only reason. So
Right,
that's why I
but
brought
just
that.
before you say that, Pat, like, we've already experienced that hit.
Yeah. Well,
Because
we
we've
still-
already scaled back the whole thing because of inflation. So this was the new one, considering COVID and inflation, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I can speak to this. So from the beginning, we were always kind of over budget. I think our starting estimate was $30 million. So that's why we really took that phased approach. We came back here, or we started here about 2 years ago, I think. Now, and that's when we said, well, instead of go out and build the whole thing all at once, let's cut things into pieces and split it up to give us more control of the budget. So in terms of the actual contracts, phase one, phase two, we are actually very close to the estimated budgets for those ones. This phase two one was within 2% of our consultant's budget, so that was really good. And then phase one was actually under the budget. So with the contracts that we've actually put out, we've done really well. It's just the overall complex as a whole was just high to begin with.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is about the ongoing consulting fees. Can those just get explained to us and to residents? Because we pay consultants to do the design, to do, the tender, all that stuff. And then we've got these ongoing consulting fees that are like 10% of the budget in the third phase, right? 565.5 million. So I'm just wondering where that comes from and why they're like pulled out of the actual budget and not just built in because we're paying somebody to do the work.
They are definitely built in. I think the contingency, that 10% that was there was for construction only. It wasn't applied to consulting fees. So our starting consulting fee budget was about $1.2 million. A good chunk of that is as we go through construction, they're paid for supporting us through that, responding to the contractor's questions. They have to do inspections, everything like that. So as we award contracts, there's costs continuing to be associated. And with the clubhouse, for example, we're at 66% design, so we're not done yet.
Right.
So to get from 66 to 100, there's a cost to that. So we're paying them as they're completing the work, but there's always going to be more expenses that come with authorizing them to proceed.
Okay, thanks for that explanation. And just to go back to the 10%, I know that there's contingency, but it just also worked out that it was close to 10% because it's 560,000 that you had allocated to consulting fees, and the total cost was like 5.8 million
Oh.
for that phase.
I think that was a coincidence.
Probably a
Big
coincidence.
catch.
Okay, Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Your Worship. My one consulting fee was asked by Councillor Desjardins, but I also have another follow-up, sort of the water table, obviously in the flats, you'd think it would be pretty high at any given time, seeing so that it's a low spot and we're kind of getting the river's right there. So the actual idea of like taking water out of the river versus wells is just sort of explain. Obviously, there's a reason for that, whether we're, maybe the water's too hard or too acidic or whatever to be spraying all over our grass or whatever. But I just kind of like to get a clarification there as compared to.
Through your worship to Councillor Cullen. So a couple of things is that you're right, the water table is probably pretty high in that area. I can't, what the information I don't have is at what point when you drill a well do you have to have it licensed? And the minute you get into, and it's going to be based on capacity, what you want to pull out of that well for irrigation. I would suggest that, I would hazard a guess that we wouldn't have to be licensed, but if you do, you are limited to capacity. But the other big limiting factors, and this is what we see at the water treatment wells, is it depends on the soil type and how fast you can pump that water out of the ground. Because you can have a water table that's right there, but if it's mixed in with clay, what you'll end up doing is you'll suck the well dry, you'll have to wait an hour for the well, fill back up, and then you'll have to pump it down again. So I would suggest that, I know geotechnical work was done. I would suggest they probably looked at that as an option, and that they found between the availability of city water at that point or the availability to pull right from the river itself, that was the best option.
So just help me out. Ashley Neufeld Park, is it on city water?
It is on.
It is? Yes. And
No.
golf course?
No.
Or we
It is.
wells?
City water.
I think they pull from the river,
No,
actually. Newfoundland.
nowhere pulls from the river anymore.
Pardon me?
There's nothing pulled from the river for city stuff.
So they,
City water on all cases?
Golf
Course? Weed City Golf Course comes out of wells?
absolutely,
Yeah,
River?
river.
Okay.
river.
So it's not like we are
Ball fields and.
reinventing the wheel here, or the wheel here. We've actually, we're doing this on a regular basis to do a golf course, so it should be fairly,
It's DFO that causes the biggest issue, and they are not fast.
okay.
That's to put it mildly.
That's good, thank you.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, through your worship, to Mr. Pulak. Appreciate the presentation, Patrick. Looking at two things, I'm wondering, I don't know whether I missed it, but the completion of Phase 2 or the anticipated completion and anticipated opening date of the fields if everything goes well? And I have a second question after.
Through your worship to the councillor. So our substantial completion date is the end of this year with final completion and handover in spring of 2025. The reason for that is just to let the season take over before we inspect the grass and make sure everything's taken properly before we hand it over.
Excellent. And next question I have, just with regards to, I know we have groups that have come forward and sort of sponsored this or come on board. Are the sponsorship dollars operational or are they capital, or just wondering how that's sort of captured in there? I know there's lots of parameters around actually disclosing the dollar amounts, but how that's sort of captured in the dollars and cents as far as the project itself.
Yeah, these figures don't include any of the sponsorships. The intent for the majority is to use them as operating dollars. But we did get one lump sum from Assiniboine Community College that was announced publicly, and that could be used for either. So that is something that we are investigating and kind of taking into our decision process when we're moving forward.
That's appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure who this is to, but so far as pumping the water from the river directly onto the golf course, there were issues with that in years past, and that's why they built a reservoir, because it wasn't good. There was so much silt. So they pumped it into a reservoir and let the silt settle, and then pump from the top half, right? So I don't know if there's if we've got any sort of provisions built for that type of thing, and/or technology could be changed and it could filter the water a lot better now than it used to. But it was damaging to the greens of the golf course. I don't know if it's the same for soccer.
Yeah, so we do have an intake manhole that has screens included in it, and then as well as the irrigation equipment also has a bunch of screens built into it as well. So there is measures there. There's definitely a maintenance component that will be required to upkeep and keep on top of in order to, make it feasible. But we've definitely considered that. We are aware of that, and we've put things in place to mitigate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Hildebrand?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just as a follow-up to all the questions about watering, the retention pond is there. I would think that's for surface runoff. Could a dual system be looked at as far as using that type of water in city water if the Department of Fisheries can't come through?
Through your worship to the councillor, we did investigate that. That was part of our geotechnical investigation, but it was deemed that the amount of water that's required to irrigate the fields, it would just drain that pond so quickly and the recovery just wouldn't be quick enough.
Yeah, I was thinking just kind of mosquitoes too, like to keep them down. And I imagine
Yeah.
the retention pond isn't going to be great for that, so.
Yeah,
okay.
for sure.
All right, thanks.
Councillor Lupke?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Mr. Pulak. So appreciate all the update on the construction phase. So I'm just thinking if we're looking like we're going to get it operational in 2025, has much more work been done on the operational part on how it's going to actually operate, function? Are we looking at doing it internally within the city? Are we looking at partners?
Yep, through your worship to the councillor. Yep, we do have a plan in place for that. So in terms of scheduling playing time and everything, recreation is going to be handling that aspect. But in terms of maintenance, we are going to be putting out an RFP for operational services contract. We haven't discussed timelines or terms, but we'll probably start with a 2-year term that could be extended based on performance. So we're already talking about what that RFP looks like. We did put out an expression of interest, and there was interest from local companies. And basically what that's going to be is they're going to come in the spring when we do that handover period with the Phase 2 contractor, and then that operations manager will then take over, and they'll be responsible for the overall maintenance of the facility.
So through Your Worship, the operations manager will be a non-city employee. It'll be a third-party contract.
That's correct.
That'll do all the maintenance, and that'll be handled within their business.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Have we gotten any further in our discussions with Brandon Youth Soccer on the current property they're using?
Not me, no.
Here's what I do know, Worship, is that there has been some negotiations. I think there is, if I recall correctly, rather than providing a lump sum to the BYS or the Brandon Youth Soccer for the Optimus Fields, I think what the agreement was that they were going to get a credit towards the use of the field. So it's going to be a lease credit to the fields. So rather than providing like cash, it's just a credit towards the use of the field that they can build into their fees, or they can do however they want to do it. But at that point, there'll be a transition of the lands of the Optimus Fields back to city ownership.
On that same note, they own that current building that is sitting there that doesn't have much operational use?
At the Optimus Park?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it of any value to anybody?
There may be some value. It again would be dependent on, I haven't been seeing that building in years, so it would depend on the condition of that building and how it's weathered through several floods at this point.
Yeah, just curious. Okay, well, this is good news. Did you say that tender is out, or can we expect to see work on that site?
The tender is closed and being ready to be awarded. I just thought it was prudent for me to inform council where things stood before we proceeded with that. But now that we've had this meeting, we'll be awarding that contract and moving forthwith.
And so the community can have expectations of seeing equipment moving around out there, and
Yes.
yeah, that's exciting. Good. Any further questions, Mr. Pulak, with this update? All good. Thank you. And now, next item, please, Madam
You need
Clerk.
a motion?
Oh, motion. Oh, thank you, Councillor Cameron.
Through your worship, thank you. I move that the presentation from General Manager of Operations with respect to an update on the Maple Leaf Food Service, or foods, pardon me, update on the Maple Leaf Foods Sports Complex budget be received.
Counselor Splett? And all those in favor? Thank you. And now, next item.
Next item is a motion to go into a closed committee of the whole meeting.
Motion to go into closed committee, Counselor Hildebrand, seconder Counselor Cullen. All those in favor?